unless you want to give a few more moments to have others log on and get set up, but we do at least have a quorum now, so thank you.
Okay. So why don't we go ahead and move forward here at this time?
I do see City Attorney McConnell just came on to camera, and usually that means he has something to add.
I apologize, Sharon and Chair. I'm just wondering how many members do we have? Is it 10 so far?
We require 8 as a quorum, and at last count, we have 9.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so with that, let's move forward. The Gresham Budget Committee is reconvened. The time is now 6:04. Let's begin with a roll call of committee members and staff in attendance. I'd like to call on Sharon Monahan, Budget and Finance Director, to lead us through the roll call.
Thanks, Chair. And I will go through my list in alphabetical order by first name. So if you could say you're here and we can check your audio, make sure we can hear you, and we'll go from there. Starting with Claire Leiter.
Here.
Dave Dyke.
I'm here.
Dina Danucci. And I do not believe Councilor Danucci is going to be able to join us this evening. Council President Morales. And I do not see him on the attendee list yet. Jan Baker.
Here.
Councilor Janine Gladfelter.
I'm here.
Councilor Palmero. I am not seeing him on the list. Nick McWilliams, again, he had let me know he had conflicts for these, unfortunately, before he was able to join the committee. Rusty Allen.
Here.
Sue O'Halloran.
Here.
Councilor Piazza. I am not seeing her yet either. Teresa Shirkey.
Here.
Mayor Stovall.
Here, thank you. Good evening.
And Councilor Vincent Jones Dixon.
Hey, good evening. Here.
Thank you. And from the staff side, I believe we have City Manager Nina Vetter.
Here.
Deputy City Manager Corey Falls.
Here.
Assistant City Manager Eric Schmidt.
Here.
Assistant City Manager Steve Fancher.
Here.
Assistant City Manager Elizabeth Coffey.
Here.
City Attorney Kevin McConnell.
Here.
Budget Manager Elizabeth McCann.
Here.
And our recording secretary Cecile Turley.
Here.
And then we have several other folks in my group who are supporting the meeting mechanics. We have Ian Peterson, Sagun Pokorel, and Tani Fagerberg. And I'm Sharon Monahan, Budget and Finance Director. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Chair Allen.
Okay, so the instructions for public comment. Community members who wish to speak or provide written comments were invited to sign up 24 hours prior to tonight's meeting with the city recorder, Susan Joy Wright. When we get to the appropriate item on the agenda, any community members who signed up to speak will be called on and you will be brought into the panel to speak. Please state your name for the record and observe the time limit of 3 minutes. Our next order of business is to review the minutes from the fiscal year 21-22 Budget Committee meeting. These were posted online with last week's meeting agenda. Please raise your hand if you wish to provide any correction or additions to those minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second?
This is Teresa. I will second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Sue O'Halloran that was seconded by Teresa Shirky to approve the minutes for the fiscal year 21-22 Budget Committee meeting. Is there any discussion on the motion? Then we'll have a call for the vote on the motion. All in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 All opposed, say nay and raise your hand. Motion passes. We now move to the agenda item for public comment on the proposed budget for the fiscal year 2022 to 23. At this time, Sharon will now call on individuals who have signed up to testify. Please remember to limit your comments to 3 minutes and focus your comments specifically to the city's proposed budget for fiscal year 22-23.
And Chair, committee members, the city recorder has told me that we did not have any individuals sign up to testify this evening.
Okay, staff will now provide follow-up information from the meeting of April 21st, 2022.
Thanks, Chair Allen and members of the committee. I wanted to provide a really brief recap of last week's meeting before we turn it over to you for your discussion this evening. First off, the city manager outlined our overall financial approach and some key aspects to that when she went through her budget presentation last week. We are, as you well know, working on a long-term financial plan with an eye beyond just this budget year. All departments have been developing 3-year operational plans, and this budget addresses many of the priority positions included in year 1 of those 3-year plans. We have also incorporated the federal funding that we are receiving through the American Rescue Plan Act. She also, in her presentation, outlined some of the specific strategies for fiscal year 22-23 and how we incorporated those into the proposed budget. We have been balancing a number of key aspects that you see outlined on this slide, really trying to have strategic use of those American Rescue Plan Act funds, using some one-time additional revenue, and really focusing on some internal staffing needs of the organization, as well as some strategic changes to how we have approached the budget process. Our executive team then walked through the highlights of their respective service areas. And that was a very good overview of the various issues throughout the city. And that presentation has been posted online for anybody who did miss it from last week's meeting. Later in the presentation, our our budget manager, Elizabeth McCann, provided an outline of the budget structure and some summary information about the proposed budget that you have before you. She also outlined the steps for the budget committee and the council steps later. So at last week's meeting, we did hear the budget message, we allowed for public comment, and we held the state shared revenue hearing as is required under Oregon budget law. That leaves us with the actions that still need to be taken by the budget committee are to approve the budget and to approve the tax rate for the upcoming fiscal year. And then City Council has the following actions that also need to be taken before the end of June that you see listed there on the right-hand side of the slide. Also, several of you did submit some comments and questions that came into us mostly yesterday. And staff did take some time to go through those questions and compile some responses. That information was provided to you just shortly before this meeting, has also been posted online. So not sure if you've had a chance to look at that information yet, but that has been provided and is out there for to assist you in this conversation tonight. So with that, those are the main points that I wanted to just touch on as a quick recap from last week. And with that, committee, I would like to turn it back over to you for your discussion and next steps. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we will now open the meeting for committee discussion. Are there budget committee members who have comments regarding the fiscal year 22-23 proposed budgets? Teresa?
Hi. First of all, I really would like to say kudos to the staff, not only for the material they put together in the budget as presented last week, but for the prompt turnaround on some pretty detailed questions. So thank you very much. It's very helpful. I did particularly appreciate the what would you call it, the alignment or the translation, the crosswalk between what was in the budget message and the actual details of the ARPA funding. I did have one further question around the ARPA funding for some of these items. Is there a plan after we expend the one-time funding that we get from ARPA, technically 2 times because it goes across 2 years, but for things like the housing and homelessness support and the youth violence prevention, is there a forward look to say, once we are able to expend those revenues that we get on a one-time basis for continuing some of those types of activities? And is there a process around for some of those things?
Committee member Shirky, I can address that particular question, which is a great one. Thank you. So as we noted, all departments have created 3-year operational plans. And so typically if you were to really break those down year by year, what you will see a lot of in year 3 of the plan is conversion of the limited term positions that are funded by ARPA into more permanent positions here at the city. So through our long-term financial plan roadmap, the intent is to be able to continue those critical public safety, housing and homelessness, youth violence prevention efforts. So we are using the ARPA funds to really kind of serve as a bridge while we work on our financial plan.
Thanks so much.
Sue O'Halloran?
Thank you. I had probably 2 or 3 different areas, but I thought I would sort of piggyback on Teresa's question. And I was looking, it's on page 85, and it talks about department operating plan, and it particularly mentions the SCT, or Services Coordination Team. So I thought it's particularly interesting what this team is doing. And I understand part of the ARPA money went there, but I didn't really see that it was set out within the budget area where I could actually look and see this particular team, what kind of funding and are we, and how many people we added. So if you could actually expand on that, because it seems such an important component of dealing with much of the concerns that our citizens have right now in needs, particularly for things such as mobile crisis response, risk assessment, crisis stabilization.
Committee member O'Halloran, if I understand your question correctly, are you asking what specifically did the ARPA dollars fund for this particular team? Oh, you're on mute. Sue, you're on mute.
We can't hear you, Sue. Sorry.
I know, I thought it was being good going through. Yes, that would be helpful to understand how much ARPA funds, but it seems like this particular team and what it does seems such an important component of what we're expecting in police and emergency services that I want to better understand what is it costing us and how does it fit in our overall 3-year plan? Is that kind of better explain what my question was?
Yes, thank you. And I can go ahead and get started just from the ARPA perspective, and then I would probably turn it over either to our Deputy City Manager, Corey Falls, or Sharon or Elizabeth to talk more specifically about that team. So we were able to use ARPA dollars to expand this team, which we also call the mental health team, and add 2 additional clinicians to that team. And they will actually be on board for around 3 years because that's the length of our contract with Cascadia Behavioral Health. So that's what we were able to really use the American Rescue Plan Act dollars for. And if our Deputy City Manager has anything additional to add, or Elizabeth or Sharon, I'll turn it over to them.
Elizabeth, I think you covered it. Was there anything else, Committee Member O'Halloran, about the positions?
I was actually curious if we could actually sort of identify, overall what keeping that team operating was costing, and that may be a little too involved to pull the pieces together. I was just trying to get a general idea of what mental health and these crisis services were, what that value was for us.
Okay, I'm sure we can follow up on what that total cost is for those 2 positions, if that's what you're looking for. And maybe Sharon or Elizabeth have that total cost now.
I'm going to say I do not have that one ready at the tip of my tongue by any stretch, but that's certainly something that we could look up and get information back out in the future.
Okay, well, when we've had so much discussion on reduction, particularly in police and services that are related, and I think this is something that your citizens have a real interest in, that's why I thought it might be worthwhile understanding really what this team, is that costing us 75,000, 100,000 a year? Is that something we can really expect to continue on beyond the 3-year? I'm sure it's probably more than that when we put all the pieces together, but I think it's a public information piece that I thought could be helpful for our citizens.
Councilman Jean Gladfelter.
Hi, thank you so much, Chair. And thanks so much for all of the work year after year. You guys are just amazing with all the information you compile in here. I start with a bunch of sticky notes, and as I go, I usually find most of my answers. And besides that, then the answers that you sent out and some of the questions that were sent out were some of mine. But I just had a couple others that I just wanted some clarification on. So I won't be long. But on page 109, you speak to adding 2 net enforcement team members. Is that on, do we have an idea? So that's telling me that we are going to bring that back. And do we have an idea of what the plan is for that? I know we're shorthanded, but is that something that we're seeing coming soon? Or am I misreading that?
I think I'll chime in with the beginning and see if anybody else can come assist with part of this. Most of the description on page 109 is really tied to what the police, fire, and parks fee had originally been established to do. Right now, with the staffing levels in police, there are some adjustments in terms of what they are able to be providing right now. So some of the things that are in that description are on hold or are a little bit being adjusted on the police side. I do believe on the net team specifically, there is also a lot of activity happening on more of the code enforcement side of that and more of the activity that is happening under Eric Schmidt's service areas. But Corey or Eric, either of you, if you want to chime in more on that, or Elizabeth, if I missed something out of that from the budget side of things, please do so.
Thank you, Counselor. I'll just say quickly, generally and operationally, as soon as we get more staffing in place, and we're doing a very heavy recruitment now with all our specialty assignments, and that being one. As soon as we have our patrol staffing up to speed, we want to get those positions filled as quickly as we can. So it's just filling our open positions right now to backfill.
Thank you. Do you want me to keep asking the rest of my questions, or do you want? Okay, I'll just go. The other question I have is on page 43, it talks about the contracts that we have with Wood Village, Troutdale, and Fairview for the intergovernmental agreement. That was hard to say. And it says it was done, it was in 15-16. Has that ever been reviewed? And for that long term, are we reviewing that as well? Because I mean, are they paying the same amount that they were back then, or has that contract been reviewed since? I guess that's the question.
Councillor Gladfelter, that contract is renegotiated periodically, and so that is what occurred in 2015-16. There is a formula in that contract that adjusts annually that controls what each of those three cities pays every year.
I would have thought that we had something in place like that, but it's just not what I read. I wanted to make sure I got it.
Yes, and there is an expiration date in that contract, and it will be reviewed again at that point.
Perfect. And one last question, and it's more of a curiosity question. On page 385, where it talks about the tourism and then the branding. So I'm just curious, the branding activities, is that like signage and things like that for the city that goes into that 231,554? And just the different, what's the, I'm just trying to, in my mind, see what the branding is as opposed to the tourism or marketing of our city. What those two different buckets of money are for.
And I was just going to say that the page that you're referring to is talking about the usage of the transient lodging tax and specifics in terms of those usage. Yes, I see Elizabeth Coffey is probably the best one to answer that question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that we have a variety of things that we work on through our communications team in terms of branding. So that is things like signage throughout the city, just different branding activities, media pitches, community events, photography, videos. There's a kind of a whole host of things that we work on in the communications department around community branding.
Thank you. So do we ever take some of that and work with the tourism end of it and utilize, I know it's off topic, sorry. It's an afterthought though, to really get more bang out of our buck. Because, we're always wanting more marketing for that tourism piece of it. Maybe there's a way that we can down the road at another point, look at something like that. I don't know. It was a weird afterthought I had, sorry.
Yes, and so we do have a partnership with the Chamber for tourism related activities, which Assistant City Manager Eric Schmidt could certainly speak more specifically about, but that is certainly something that we have an ongoing agreement with them on.
Those were my questions. Thank you.
I've been trying to raise my hand again, but I cannot get that little function, keeps wanting to lower my hand. So I'm willing certainly to stand back while other questions get asked, but at some point I had a couple more to ask.
Why don't you just go ahead now, Sue?
Is that fine? Okay.
Yes.
Well, actually, I appreciate Janine, Councilor Janine, having brought that up, because I actually thought 231,000 being used for general fund portion of community branding activities was a fair amount of money. I know from looking here that we've set aside some money for some community events, a little over 17,000, and then 75,000 to the chamber. So that to me is a fair chunk of change at 231,000, that's not really well defined in my mind.
Chair, committee members, this is Eric Schmidt, one of the assistant city managers. I think this page itself is new this year to the budget document.
Yeah.
The purpose of this really is to document the use of tourism dollars in terms of where they are going as it relates to our current budget, and also making sure it's in compliance with state statutes in terms of limitations and usage of the dollars for tourism related activities. So that's really was the primary purpose of this page, to be able to show that in transparency about how those dollars are used to make sure we're in compliance with state regulations.
So I appreciate that, Eric, but really from a budget, member perspective, that amount of money I would want to see a little better laid out as to really how that money is being used. Community branding activities is pretty broad, and I'm not necessarily objecting to it.
Oh, Sue, you got on mute again.
You want to mute?
Trying to hold it there. It's a fair amount of money to not be very well defined. I'm not really objecting to it, but I'm not comfortable that we should be doing something that's community branding activities at that amount without better defining how it is that we're using it. And so that's probably a suggestion for the future, or something to maybe let the finance committee know. But since they are tourism dollars, I think it would behoove us to be more direct in stating how that is benefiting tourism.
Yeah, I think we could certainly work on that. That's a good note, as Assistant City Manager Schmidt noted. It's the first time we've included that in the budget, and I do think the community branding activities do tend to vary from year to year based on direction from council. So, for example, in a previous year, we really focused on signage, entryway signage, and other types of signage throughout the city. In other years, we've been really focusing on events. And so we'll be doing a fair amount of push to the 20th year of the Gresham Arts Festival for this coming year, for example. Versus during the pandemic, it was a little bit different. It was more about promoting kind of the good work of the city. So it does vary from year to year and can be somewhat hard to predict about exactly what branding activities we might take. But I think as an example, we will be using a fair amount of video and graphic design resources this coming year to focus on the 20th year of the Arts Festival as kind of a regional destination. So that's kind of one example of the support that we're trying to provide.
But we have a budget line item, do we not, for the Arts Festival? I thought I saw it in here. So this is enhancing that. I understand it, but
if I may, I think what this line item is, what this is referring to on this particular page, is a summary of all of the various places within the budget that happen to fall under this overall umbrella. So these are not separate line items in the budget. On this page, they are accumulation of wherever in the budget those kind of activities happen to fall, if that helps. And
so would, for instance, the Arts Festival or the Gresham Holiday Spirit, would those then be falling under here? I don't want to belabor this, and maybe it doesn't bother anybody else, but it does bother me that it feels like a lot of money that I don't know exactly what it's being used for. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll move on to my other last question.
While you're looking up your last question, Sue, I echo your concern, and it just would be for, grounds for improvement to just make a reference back to the places where it's being funded. I was flipping through my budget book, seeing if I could find it somewhere, but to be some sort of a point back to where it is actually being funded in this particular year, because I think it's a great observation, Sue, and I applaud the city for the transparency as well, putting the new page in saying, this is what we're required to do, and this is how much money there is. But just to make that tie back to where it shows up in the budget, not down to the every last cent, but the big chunks of where it's going. So, Sue, I just wanted to embellish what you had already said. So go ahead with your next one.
Thank you. The other last one was, I noticed on page 88 where this is under fire, and it talked about multiple fire stations are in need of immediate need. And then it goes on to state that Fire and Emergency Services will continue its multi-year process to study the condition and location. And I think this is a really important need, but I didn't see that there was anything set aside in the budget. So that was my question. Is this being addressed at some future time, or is it being addressed in some manner that I just didn't spot?
I can speak to that a little bit, committee member O'Halloran. One thing that we're also doing is we're doing a standards of cover review for our fire department, which will look at facility locations, response times, and all that. That work should be done early this fall or late summer. That's also going to help guide us into the future about what we're going to do with some of our facility needs. And I believe the facility needs for fire were also part of our 3-year plan to help make some improvements there.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that there's something that's going forward to get some resolution and decisions for the future. So thank you. And I think that I do want to say I appreciate as well the thoroughness of the book. It took me a bit to go find some things that I cared about, like community enhancing grants and arts and culture, but I did finally find them under new categories. So I do appreciate all the work, and thank you for allowing me to be a participant.
Any other discussion or questions? Committee member Dave Dyke.
Thanks, Rusty. Yeah, I didn't have any additional questions beyond the written ones that we sent in, and I just wanted to. It seems like maybe we're winding down our questions, so I just wanted to take a second to say thanks for putting together a great budget. Definitely something I can support, and look forward to any further discussion there. Thanks, Rusty.
Mayor Stovall.
Thank you, Chair. I want to certainly want to echo all the thanks that everybody's given. This is a huge lift when you think about all the work that goes into this, not just the numbers, but the narrative. Wow, there is a lot of information, and it actually brings anxiety up in me when I'm reading all through this, knowing the incredible detail orientation that it takes to get all of this done. And that's not my contribution to the world. Is that level of detail orientation. A lot of great stuff here, similar to what Mr. Dave Dyke just referenced in regards to this being a budget I can support. I had some questions, and strangely enough, other folks had some of the same questions, and they put them in they sent those questions by email. And so there was a couple of key questions that I had that were already answered. The one question that I do have that I just would like to pose is, have we ever done an exercise in our budgeting process to look at specifically fire funding with the revenues from the other municipalities? I think and what it would look like from a budgetary standpoint if the other municipalities contributed at the same level that our Gresham community members do from a perspective of cost. Because when I look at what we receive and potentially what it would cost to provide those services, I would venture to say that they're actually getting a bargain, but I'm not 100% sure of that. When I look through all the numbers, have we done any type of exercise to kind of look at that and say this is where it should be based on what Gresham community members are paying for fire services?
Mayor Stovall and other committee members, during the last contract renewal process, we did do some of that work, and an effort was made to true that up more. Yes, there is still some disparity at the level of payment, but we did last time look at their property tax base and started with a comparison there. And so some work has been done. Is the work complete? No.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I figured we've done some preliminary work. I just as I'm stepping through all that and I'm looking at the needs that we have from a budgetary standpoint, both now and in the future, especially as we look at that 3-year type of time frame. That was one key area where I know we're looking at potential solutions that go with our long-term financial plan. But that since we're on the budget, since that's part of the budget, just wanted to get a little insight. So thank you very much again. Thank you, the entire team, Sharon Monahan, Elizabeth McCann, and everybody else under the leadership of Assistant City Manager Elizabeth Coffey, and then just the entire team. I can only imagine what it took and what it takes to produce such a substantial document as a result of all the work that goes in behind it. So greatly appreciate the work done here.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we shall move on then. At this time, the committee can take one of 3 actions. We can approve the budget with no changes. We can approve the budget with amendments, or we can recess the meeting until another date. What action would the committee wish to take this evening?
I suggest that we move forward, and I see Teresa has her hand up.
You took the words out of my mouth, Sue. I would like to propose to the body here on this call that, just as Sue said, that we move forward to approve the budget as presented by the city staff. No changes, and certainly not another meeting. And Rusty, if you need me to make a motion to that effect, I'm happy to make a motion to approve the budget as presented.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, I'd like to seek a motion to approve the proposed budget for 2022-23 as presented by the city staff. The motion will require 8 affirmative votes to reach a majority approval of the budget membership. The motion to approve the budget requires specific wording that will be shown on the screen and also listed in our script. Please remember to state the motion exactly as it's written. Do I have a motion to approve the proposed budget for fiscal year 2022-23 as presented by the city staff?
So I'm toggling back and forth between the notes. So hopefully Zoom will let me be on that other screen and talk at the same time, but I'm going to try to read that exact wording. And if you can't hear me, we'll just have to do it another way.
We can't hear you, unfortunately. And you are muted.
Do you want me to try? Move to approve the proposed budget for fiscal year 2022-23 as presented by city staff.
Do I have a second?
Can I second it without exact words?
Yes, you can.
That works.
Okay.
So yeah, I will second it.
So we have a motion by committee member Sue O'Halloran that was seconded by committee member Teresa Shirkey to approve the proposed budget for fiscal year 2022-23 as presented by the city staff. Any discussion to this motion? Then we will go ahead and vote on the motion. All in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 It's hard to count because you keep moving around on my screen depending on whether you're on camera or not. I believe that was everybody though. Can I get somebody else to confirm that for me?
Yes.
That's what I saw too.
Maybe the best way is to all opposed, say nay and raise your hand.
And I see nobody.
So motion to approve the proposed budget for fiscal year 2022-23 passes. We now need a second motion to approve the property tax rate for the general fund. This motion also requires 8 affirmative votes to reach a majority of the budget committee. The specific language for the motion will be shown on the screen. It is included in the script. Please remember to state the motion exactly as it is written. Do I have a motion to approve the property tax rate for general fund?
I move to approve the fiscal year 2022-23 property tax rate for the general fund of $3,629,000 per thousand of taxable assessed value.
Except we do need to have you
3.6129. Sorry.
We'd love that other rate, but it would solve a lot of problems. If you could just say that last line over again, Jan, that'd be great.
Okay. For the property tax rate for the general fund of 3.6129 per thousand of taxable assessed value. Is that better?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Jan Baker that was seconded by Sue O'Halloran to approve the property tax rate as stated. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, all in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 I counted everybody, yes.
Then all opposed, say nay and raise your hand. Okay, so motion to approve the property tax rate for the general fund passes. If there's no other business to come before the committee, Sharon?
I did have one thing I did want to make sure we touched on tonight, and I don't know if anybody else has any comments. I did just want to recognize Sue O'Halloran. This has been, I believe, your 21st budget that you have worked on as part of this budget committee. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you for all of the time and all of the work that you have put on this committee over the years. It has been such a pleasure working with you throughout that entire time. You have always been able to provide a very just measured, thoughtful, polite and considerate approach through all of the years that I have been able to work with you on this committee. And I just wanted to make sure we did take a moment to acknowledge that and just say thank you, and wanted to make sure we did that before this evening wrapped up. So thank you very much, Sue, for all that you have done for this community in this role and in many others.
Thank you. As I said, it's been a pleasure to be a participant. And yes, I did recognize this was my very last year having some say so one way or the other on a budget. But what a pleasure actually to work with what is a very well managed city and terrific staff. And if you will allow me, I can remember when Sharon was a budget analyst and coming from, I forget what environmental services was it?
I spent 10 years in environmental services.
That's
Yes.
what I thought. Anyway, it's my pleasure. And I have another meeting or two with the rest of you, and then I'll be able to say adieu, but there's probably some other place you'll see me pop up. Thank you.
So I would like to say something about Sue. She always asks the best questions. And they're always questions that you think later, oh, I wish I would have asked that question. Or I'm so glad she got that question answered for us. So Sue, we are really, really going to miss you.
And if I could just add one little note on there too, I just echo everything everyone has said, but you know, I just appreciate and always have your knowledge of the history. You always bring some in-depth information forward that maybe, you know, some people might not have known from the past. Just a wealth of knowledge, and I'm going to miss you on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been fun.
All well spoken, and thanks, Sue, for your work with us. There's no other business than we can have the budget committee adjourn at this point.
Do we need a motion for that, Rusty?
Not according to the script, I don't believe, do we, Sharon?
We do. Okay. I could put a last word in, you know, otherwise.
So we shall consider.
I see the city attorney there. Do we need an official motion to adjourn? We typically haven't, but.
Chair, I don't think it's technically necessary, but just for formality, you can do so by unanimous consent and simply ask if does anybody object to adjourning the budget committee meeting. And if there is none, then you shall state that the budget committee hearing is adjourned.
Okay. Any committee members have any discussion or issues with us adjourning the budget committee at this point? Then by common consent, not seeing any objections, then we shall consider the budget committee meeting adjourned.
Great.
Thank each of you for your time.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Rusty, thank you for chairing.
Thank you.
Thank
Nice
you,
job,
sir.
Rusty.